£25.3 billion. That is a huge, mind-boggling gap between what our government splash out on public services and the hard tax cash actually raked in north of the border. Now, if you listen to the SNP, they'll tell you it's all just theoretical nonsense. But ask their political foes and they'll tell you it's absolute proof that an independent Scotland would be flat broke on day one. Let's break down these latest GERS figures, which stand for Government Expenditure and Revenue Scotland. Every single year, these official Scottish Government statistics land and cause a bit of a stooshy. And this year's batch shows our national deficit sitting at a colossal £25.3 billion for 2005 and 26. For those unsure, the notional deficit is a theoretical loss rather than a real one. Now, to give credit where credit's due, that overspend is technically down by 600 grand compared to last year's record-breaking non-Covid high. But compared to 2 years ago, when the gap was 21.4 billion, our national tab has shot up by 4.1 billion. Here's how the books actually balance, or rather, don't balance. Last year, the tax raised in Scotland generated 98.3 billion in tax. That's up from 91.4 billion previously. But public spending on services for folks living in Scotland reached a record 123.6 billion, which is up from 117.6 billion. Which means that we spent 25.3 billion more than we brought in. When you look at our total economic output, Scotland's deficit stands at 10.9% of GDP. Compare that to the UK as a whole, where the deficit sits at a much slimmer 4.2%. Despite that massive £25 billion deficit, Scots actually get £2,720 per person more in the public spending than the UK average. That's an increase of £51 ahead on last year. Total public spending per head in Scotland worked out to an incredible £22,281 compared to the UK average of £19,561. So, where does that cash go? Well, it helps to pay for the extra perks we enjoy up here. Things like the ballooning devolved welfare bill, up nearly £700 million in a year to £6.7 billion, as well as the free prescriptions, free personal care, free bus travel for under 22s, and no university tuition fees. And how is that paid for? Through the decades-old UK funding mechanism known as the Barnett Formula, which pools and shares resources from across the entire United Kingdom. Now, here's the paradox. Despite Scots paying significantly higher income tax rates in recent years, and despite extra levies on North Sea oil and gas, our tax revenues per person are virtually identical to the rest of the UK. In fact, when you include our geographical share of the North Sea oil, tax revenue per head in Scotland is £17,718 compared to the £17,720 across the UK as a whole. In short, we bring in virtually the exact same tax cash per head as the UK average, but we spend almost 2.7 grand extra per person. Pro-UK parties say that proves the strength of your union safety net. They call that £2,720 the union dividend. The SNP, however, they see things very differently. They claim that it shows that Britain is broken and Scotland would do better as an independent country. In the meantime, the SNP are pushing for full fiscal autonomy within the UK, which means Scotland would take control of all tax and spending and the Barnett Formula would get scrapped entirely. If that happened, or independence for that matter, critics point out that Holyrood would somehow have to find a way to plug that extra £25 billion shortfall, either through eye-watering tax hikes or deep spending cuts. So how do SNP ministers defend these numbers? They argue that GERS only reflects Scotland under a Westminster rule, not what an independent nation could achieve. This is what Deputy First Minister and Finance Secretary Jenny Gilruth has to say. The latest GERS stats show that the total and devolved revenues grew faster than spending, showing in particular that in the areas where our government has control, we are delivering sustainable finances. GERS provides notional estimates for Scotland's deficit as part of the UK. It simply does not show what an independent Scotland's position will be. With the powers of independence, we would be able to chart a different path, ensuring we grow the economy to allow Scotland to reach our full potential. So Jenny Gilruth's message is clear. The SNP claim that where they have direct control, revenues are growing. They view GERS as a snapshot of the status quo, claiming full independence would give Scotland the economic levers needed to make the pie bigger and erase the deficit over time. Unsurprisingly, opposition parties and pro-UK campaigners are calling absolute nonsense on that argument. To unionist parties, today's report is the ultimate annual reality check, the black and white proof that Scotland gets a cracking deal out the UK and that tearing up the union would cause financial mayhem. In response, the Scottish Secretary Douglas Alexander hit back for the UK government. These statistics clearly demonstrate the value to people in Scotland of being part of a strong United Kingdom. By pooling and sharing resources across the country, people living in Scotland benefit from significant additional public spending. That means £2,720 more per person compared to the UK average, which the Scottish Government can spend on vital services like schools, hospitals and transport. Douglas Alexander points straight to that £2,720 union dividend per Scot as concrete evidence that staying together keeps our schools, roads and the NHS properly funded. At the end of the day, GERS is a battleground where both sides of Scotland's constitutional debate spin the stats to back their position. To the SNP, the figures are a national symptom of a broken system, proving Scotland needs full fiscal powers to unshackle its economy. To pro-UK parties, the figures are undeniable proof that the £25 billion safety net provided by the UK, showing that independence would leave a massive crater in the public finances. One thing is for certain, whether you think the £25.3 billion shortfall is a reason to stay or a reason to leave, it's your hard-earned cash on the line.